From News Channel 8, this is Capitol Insider with Morris Jones.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us. This is where the federal government and the business world meet on Capitol Insider. Tonight, another feud in the 2016 race for the White House. This time, Republican frontrunner Donald Trump is calling out Jeb Bush over his claims that his brother kept the nation safe during his presidency. Now Jeb is fighting back. Athena Jones has the latest.
I'm not blaming George Bush, but I don't want Jeb Bush to say my brother kept us safe.
The feud between Donald Trump and Jeb Bush is heating up.
For him, it looks as though he's an actor playing the role of a candidate for president.
From the Sunday shows to social media, with Bush defending his brother's handling of the September 11th attacks.
He united the country, he organized our country, and he kept us safe.
Bush said by repeatedly bringing up 9/11, Trump shows he's not, quote, a serious person, and that he has grave concerns about Trump being in charge of nuclear weapons.
Across the spectrum of foreign policy, Mr. Trump talks about things that as though he's still on The Apprentice.
Trump said he was just taking issue with Jeb saying during the CNN debate that his brother kept America safe.
The World Trade Center came down, so when he said we were safe, that's not safe. We lost 3,000 people.
The latest chapter in this battle of GOP contenders began Friday, when Trump told Bloomberg Television,
when you talk about George Bush, I mean, say what you want, the World Trade Center came down during his time. If you look at Sandy Hook,
you can't blame George Bush for that.
He was president, okay?
Bush quickly fired back on Twitter, calling the GOP frontrunner pathetic.
You know, dealing with killers.
Now his campaign is mocking Trump in a new video, using his own words.
Who do you talk to for military advice right now?
Well, I watch the shows.
And that's one of the ways that he bones up on our national security.
And fundraising off the dust-up, sending this appeal to supporters, arguing that under Trump's logic, FDR should be blamed for Pearl Harbor. This, as Trump insisted, he could have prevented 9/11 because his tough stance on immigration would have kept the hijackers out.
There's a good chance that those people would not have been in our country.
Meanwhile, Ben Carson made an unusual claim, saying President Bush could have used oil as leverage against Arab states to find Osama bin Laden sooner.
I think they would have known where he was.
Let's pick things up there for tonight's Political Insider. Joining me, Kevin Cirilli, reporter for The Hill. All right, Donald Trump and Jeb Bush are trading barbs over 9/11 after Trump suggested George W. Bush was responsible for the terrorist attack. Now Jeb's fighting back. Kevin, Jeb Bush has basically ignored past comments from Trump. Were these fighting words this time that he just couldn't avoid?
You know, I think that at this point in the race, former Florida Governor Jeb Bush is going to have to respond to anyone who is attacking him simply because he still is in single digits in the polls. You've got to remember, Morris, that former Governor Bush won what's known as the pre-election campaign period and raised big bucks from all of the establishment donors. And yet he hasn't been able to convince voters in Iowa or New Hampshire or any of the other voters across the country, really, that this is his American moment and that this is the right time in our nation's history for another Bush to be the Republican nominee. There is so much anger in the electorate, and essentially what Mr. Trump just did is take what is arguably one of Governor Bush's strongest policy positions in the Bush brand of politics and attacked him for it. And now Governor Bush is once again on defense and off message.
One thing Trump has managed to do is define Jeb Bush throughout the whole campaign. What is Trump's strategy in all of this? And does it serve Bush any good to bring up his brother's presidency?
Regardless of what you think of Mr. Trump's political strategy, there is no question that Governor Bush right now is on defense and not talking about the issues that he wants to. And he hasn't been able to break through the crowded Republican field. There's still plenty of time. He still could recast himself and relaunch himself, but he's also facing a lot of the same political opposition coming from Senator Marco Rubio, who, quite frankly, a lot of the Republican donors are giving a second look and saying that perhaps Senator Rubio is the better one positioned to be the new Republican, if you will, standard bearer for the party.
Yeah, who would have thought, huh? Who would have thought?
No. Yeah, who would have thought to say, you know, it is right. You know, I interviewed Mr. Trump last week in his Trump penthouse tower in downtown Manhattan, and he strikes me as someone who is not going away, despite the whisper campaign just a few weeks ago, and even really last week in particular. where people were saying that Mr. Trump was on his way out. He's not going anywhere. He fully intends to keep going.
And who would have thought, too, that Jeb Bush would have to be worried about the other guy in Florida, but that's definitely the case. Now, there are some who say Donald Trump is right about 9/11 and that W could have done more to prevent the terrorist attacks. What's your take?
You know, it really doesn't matter what my take is, but what I think this does is really force a conversation about the terrorism, politics, and policy that we have more than, of course, all of these years after 9/11. And so I do think that what we saw during the 2012 presidential cycle is that President Obama was able to campaign off of killing Osama bin Laden. And so now Republicans are trying to criticize former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton for her time at the State Department, but they're also going to have to come up with new ideas for how they would handle foreign policy. And something that former Governor Bush has tried to do is capitalize off of the Bush political brand, and right now he's on defense.
All right, let's switch gears to the Democrats.
Yeah.
The Biden for president rumors continue to swirl as a new poll shows a growing number of registered Democrats think the VP should not run. This as Biden is reportedly meeting with his top advisors tonight. Now, how much would a Biden bid disrupt the Clinton camp, and what about Bernie Sanders? Bernie's nobody's worry, is he?
Well, you know, I think that Vice President Biden still has a huge opening to get into this race simply because if you look at the mood of the country, if you will, people are really craving an authentic, off-the-cuff, candid politician. And I do think there is something to be said for Vice President Biden not being a Clinton or a Bush. And quite frankly, I think that as Hillary Clinton continues to face questions surrounding her use of her email server, that FBI investigation still ongoing, and of course she's set to testify on Capitol Hill about the Benghazi attack later this week, I think that a lot of moderate, more pragmatic Democrats are going to be taking a second look at Vice President Biden. He gave a major policy speech today touting his energy record. And, you know, this is someone who is going to not be forced to make a decision simply because of other people. If he decides to run, his supporters argue it's because he thinks he has the best vision for the country.
It's always good to get your insight. Kevin Cirilli, reporter for The Hill. Thanks again, Kevin.
Thank you.
Well, the road to the White House isn't only about policy. Money plays a major role in a candidate's chances. And while Jeb Bush may be polling in the single digits, his fundraising still makes him a competitor in the race. Poppy Harlow takes a look at the finances.
The huge field of GOP candidates. If single-digit poll numbers don't force some out soon, their war chest almost certainly will. Campaign finance disclosures were filed Thursday, tangible evidence of who's up and who's down. Excluding super PACs, Jeb Bush raised $13.4 million in the last quarter, but spent $11.5 million, forcing him to slash staff salaries and use cheaper hotels. Others fared far worse. Rick Santorum and Bobby Jindal, each camp with less than $300,000 cash on hand. Political outsiders did best. Ben Carson raised the most of any GOP candidate in the quarter, $20 million. Carly Fiorina at nearly $7 million. Then there's Donald Trump, proudly self-funding his campaign. He took in $3.9 million from 74,000 of what the campaign calls unsolicited donors. But surprisingly, the billionaire frontrunner's campaign has little cash in its coffers.
I'm really rich.
Trump's war chest, something he can drop millions into whenever needed, had only $254,000 at the end of the quarter. The unorthodox candidate runs an unusual political operation. His second biggest expense, $723,000 to TAG Air, a company he owns that operates his fleet of planes and helicopters. But his biggest expense is those now famous Make America Great Again hats and T-shirts, a $781,000 line item, nearly $400,000 more than Rick Santorum raised all quarter. Where isn't Trump spending money? Advertising, for one. He's a proven master at generating free airtime. By contrast, Bush spent $415,000 on media in the last quarter. Then there's this.
I don't want pollsters. People that are running against me, they all have pollsters. They pay hundreds of thousands of dollars.
His estimate is a tad low. Hillary Clinton's campaign paid more than $1 million for polling last quarter alone. Trump is proud of his conservative spending, saying in a statement, To be number one in every poll and to have spent the least amount of dollars of any serious candidate is a testament to what I can do for America. And the little things count too. For the Trump campaign, they include $1,400 on New York City cabs, $1,302 spent at Home Depot, and $324 at Applebee's.
Poppy Harlow reporting. Democratic candidate Bernie Sanders is also doing well with fundraising, but he isn't taking money from just anyone. Sanders has rejected a $2,700 donation from pharmaceutical executive Martin Shkreli, opting instead to give the funds to a health clinic. Shkreli came under fire, you'll recall, last month for hiking up the price of an important cancer drug by more than 5,000%. The donation snub isn't sitting well with the drug executive, posting on Twitter that he was so angry at Sanders that he could punch a wall. We turn to ISIS straight ahead on Capital Insider. Malaysia authorities have arrested a hacker who helped the terrorist group publish stolen personal information of U.S. military members. We have a compelling report next. But first, U.S. stocks rose today despite news that China's GDP growth was below 7%. Here's a look at the closing numbers from Wall Street. U.S. officials are trying to extradite an alleged hacker arrested in Malaysia for giving stolen personal information to ISIS. It was used to create a kill list targeting U.S. military members. Brian Todd has this compelling report.
A 20-year-old studying computer science in Malaysia, accused of helping ISIS publish a kill list of American service members. Ardit Farizi, originally from Kosovo, arrested in Malaysia, and tonight U.S. officials are seeking his extradition. According to a criminal complaint, Farizi hacked into the computer system of an internet hosting company in Phoenix, stole the names, addresses, phone numbers, photographs, and passwords of more than 1,300 U.S. service members and other government staffers, then gave the data to ISIS, quote, to target the U.S. personnel for attacks and violence. How dangerous is this 20-year-old alleged hacker?
In terms of effort, with the right amount of money, with the right amount of ideological commitment and enough time on your hands, you can pull something off like that. And I mean, IS has said that they will commit themselves to combating their infidel enemies wherever they are present. That also includes online.
Prosecutors say after he hacked the U.S. service members' data, Farizi gave it to Junaid Hussain, the notorious head of ISIS's hacking division, killed recently in a U.S. drone strike. Hussein's believed to have inspired this ISIS-instigated attack on U.S. soil, the foiled attempt in May to shoot up a Prophet Muhammad cartoon drawing contest in Garland, Texas. U.S. officials say Hussein and his British-born wife, Sally Jones, published the kill list online this summer, encouraging lone wolf attacks, warning, quote, "O Crusaders, know that we are in your emails and computer systems, watching and recording your every move, and that ISIS operatives, quote, will strike at your necks in your own lands."
This drives people to follow up on this information. Maybe it'll get a hit on someone, maybe it won't. It also does really freak out U.S. government, military and law enforcement personnel.
CNN attempted to reach dozens of people on the kill list. Some emails bounced back as being old addresses. Others went through. One retired serviceman confirmed to us the phone number for him on the list was accurate, and he said the Pentagon alerted him. A U.S. military official tells CNN, so far they have no indication any U.S. service members have been attacked. But analysts warn there are more ISIS hackers out there.
They could live anywhere from Western countries like Western Europe, England, France, Germany, or they could be in Malaysia like Mr. Farizi.
Brian Todd reporting. The FBI is investigating claims that an American high school student hacked his way into CIA Director John Brennan's private email account. The New York Post first interviewed the alleged hacker, who said he was able to access Brennan's AOL account. The CIA says it's aware of the report, but is declining to comment. The hacker also claims he gained access to Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson's account with Comcast. Straight ahead on Capital Insider, reforming the general schedule. It's a system that's been used for decades to hire, promote, and fire federal employees. But now the Obama administration is taking aim at it. Why? Our government insider explains next. In tonight's Government Insider, reforming the general schedule. It's the system by which federal employees are hired, paid, promoted, and fired, and now it's under review in the Defense Department. For more, we turn to our guest tonight on Capitol Insider, Joe Davidson, Federal Diary columnist at The Washington Post. Joe, a proposal called Force of the Future is the Obama administration's attempt to reform civil service within the Defense Department. Give us an overview of the proposed plan.
Well, essentially, the plan would give the Secretary of Defense much more authority over federal employees. It's worth noting that the Department of Defense hires more civilians, employs more civilians than any other department by far. So whatever happens in the Defense Department is an indication of the kinds of things that the administration might want to see government-wide. This particular authority, the kinds of authority that would be given to the Secretary would allow him or her much greater authority over such issues as pay, hiring and firing of people. It would allow the Defense Department to, as they say, divest low performers, which means firing people who aren't up to snuff. And so, generally speaking, it would give the management of the department, the Secretary in particular, and certainly his or her designees, greater authority over the work lives of the civilians in the department.
Now, Joe, one very controversial point in this new proposal is the development of an alternative to the General Schedule, or GS system as we know it. Currently, it's used across agencies as a ranking system for federal employees. But now, the Obama administration has suggested that it should be scrapped. Under this new plan, what would take its place?
Well, the plan was not specific about what would take its place, but certainly we know from other experiences in the Defense Department and elsewhere around government, that there's this notion of pay for performance, which is a bad word and a bad term in the view of some because of the controversy of a previous system at the Defense Department. It allows for what they call pay bands. Essentially, it again goes to this notion of giving management greater flexibility to both reward and punish civilian employees within the Defense Department. And so that's probably the kind of thing that would replace the General Schedule or the GS system.
I'm sure federal employee unions have something to say. How are they responding? For
sure. Well, they're not happy about this plan. There are some perks in the plan, perhaps you could call them, that they certainly appreciate. Paid paternity and maternity leave, for example. But this whole notion of moving again toward this quote-unquote pay-for-performance system is something that they really oppose. Not that they oppose people getting paid based on how well they perform. But they say this kind of a system would allow too much discretion for managers who could then apply it in discriminatory ways. And in fact, the previous system at the Defense Department under the Bush administration, one of the reasons it was eventually terminated by Congress, essentially outlawed by Congress, was because of complaints that it operated in a discriminatory fashion. One of the beauties of the General Schedule, the GS system, and perhaps it's one of the things that makes it a bit rigid as well, is it does have these classifications, and it's more easily, managers can more easily put people in these different classifications, and that works to kind of dissuade the kinds of discrimination on a racial and gender basis that we saw under the previous NSPS system, as it was called, in the Defense Department.
But, Joe, from what I gather from you, it sounds as though this new proposal is something that could be used to replace the entire GS system throughout government.
Well, I think that is definitely a possibility. There's no formal proposal to do that at the moment. But you have to think that if the Obama administration is going to try to create a new system, or certainly is considering that within the Defense Department, and it is the largest department, then it's not too much of a jump, not too much of a stretch to imagine that these kinds of proposals could find themselves working their way across government.
Let me ask you this. The Defense Department, are they starting there because it's too much of a dinosaur? And secondly, who has the final say in all of this?
Well, this is now up for review within the Pentagon, and it would have to go before the Secretary, Ash Carter there, the Secretary of Defense, before this is implemented. I think there's still a good way to go before this becomes final. I think that they will have to take into account opposition from the unions and their Democratic allies on the Hill, and the kinds of political hassles that they might incur should they decide to implement a system of this type. I can also say, however, that the move toward greater, broader civil service reform, I think, is continuing to grow in this city, both among Republicans and Democrats. And so I think this is something that the unions will have to contend with in the not-too-distant future.
And it's an election year, right?
That's right. This one and next one, for that matter.
All right. Joe Davidson, Federal Diary columnist at the Washington Post. Thanks again, Joe.
Thank you.
We'll take a break right now, but even when we're not on the air, you can follow us on the web at the Capital Insider blog on WJLA.com or Capital Insider on Twitter. We'll be back in 2 minutes. And that's the latest from Capital Insider. I'm Morris Jones. Thanks for being with us. Join us Tuesday night at 8 and 11. U.S. pilots have been warned not to react to aggressive Russian jets flying in Syria. So what happens next? Our defense insider will be here with the latest. Plus, we'll have an update on congressional efforts to revive the Export-Import Bank. Do we need it? Until then, keep it right here on News Channel 8.